Right, okay, so I've had a few issues with recording this, so this is third time lucky. I'm going to go through how to structure the 16-mark question here. So what I'd like you to do is I'll be doing it on this document, but I'd like you to write out a copy, your own version as I go along. Do pause the video if you need a bit more time to write, if I'm going a bit faster for you than you'd like. It's just about making sure you have a written copy of this example that you can refer to, because I'm hoping to make it nice and clear to you how to structure the paragraphs and this question as a whole. So the question that we are going to look at, and I'm going to write it out, it would be a question 11, and it is explain and briefly evaluate the view that media representations of femininity are based on stereotypes. And that is a 16-mark question, because that's the structure we're doing today. Okay, so this is actually the question, from June 2017. It's a nice question. Students came out really happy with this, and I'm going to talk you through how I would go about approaching a question like this. And this is the same way I would tackle any 16-mark question. So we've looked at the mark scheme. We know you need to have 2 times AO1 with evidence and 1 times AO3. So 2 supporting, 1 going against. So to start off with, I just start off by doing a little table with studies. So AO1, so that's supporting the question. And then AO3, that's against the question. I don't usually write the sort of this bit. I normally just write the AO1 and AO3. You'll get used to that as we go through. So, first sociologist that we would use that would argue that, which spoke about representations of femininity being sort of stereotypical or traditional. We had Tuckman. And Tuckman spoke about symbolic annihilation. So the narrow representations of women. We also had the Bristol Fawcett Society. So that they get classed as a sociologist, and that was the idea that women are relatively invisible. And then we also had Ferguson, and that was the hymn. Let's get rid of that bracket. The hymn, home, and looking good for him. I'm going to regret spreading this out so much. What I might do is just pop it to the side in a moment, just so that it's out of my way, so I can write the paragraphs. And then for AO3s, so I know I only need 2, AO1, but to start off with, I just want to see what evidence I've got to sort of dip into. And I do the same for against the question. So we had a lesson on changing representations. And in that, we had a sociologist, I've made that so small, called Glascock, and that was the one where we spoke about strong, independent lead characters. There was also Jill, who spoke about how there's now a shift from passive to active representations of women in advertising, and we looked at that Reebok advert. And then we also had Gauntlet. And that was the idea that men and women are are represented as equal, like equal status, but they were still represented as being different to one another. But they weren't so much heavily stereotyped as they used to be. And that was when we looked at Friends. So what I do in this respect is I think, right, okay, these are all my sociologists I've got in my bag. It might be that in some cases you might only be able to think of one AO3. that's fine. Then that'll be the AO3 you're going for. Or you might only have 2 AO1s. Those would be the ones that you're going to use. But if you can think of more than you need, it's worthwhile spending that time trying to think which one would I be able to develop best in relation to the question. So this question here is about the view that media representations of femininity are based on stereotypes. So the sociologist I want to use, I'm going to use Tuckman because I think it's quite easy to talk about the limited, narrow portrayals of women as the housewife or women as sex objects. It's quite easy in terms of explaining it in terms of the question. I'm also going to use Ferguson because I can draw in some examples there as well. And that's just one that I feel that I could probably write a bit more for this question. And then for AO3, I'll just go for the top one. Let's just go for Glascock. To be honest, I could have used any of them within there. Now, what I'm going to do, and it's personal preference for the ones that you would do, and it depends on how many you've got to choose from. So I'm just going to pop this to the side for the moment. I'm going to keep referring back to it. That is my plan, just to sort of keep it in my mind. I will keep sliding across to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write out this answer, and I'd like you to write it alongside me. So by you actually physically writing this rather than just sort of passively watching me write it, it should help give you the sort of feel of what a developed paragraph should be. It'll also make you see how much you should be writing in your handwriting, because my handwriting might be smaller, it might be bigger, and if you've written it out in your own handwriting, you'll see how much there is as well. And also it sort of gets you in the flow of it. Well, that's the hope anyway. So I'm going to start off, and the first paragraph I'm going to do is Tuckman, so supporting the question. So, and remember, we're still using this point, evidence, explain, link. So women are found to be often represented in a narrow range of roles. So that's my point, to the point. Then my sociologist, my evidence. Tuckman argued that by women being portrayed, excuse my handwriting, I've already written this out once and it didn't quite work, so I'm trying to get it through, as you can probably see in the top corner. Having done this a few times and it not saved, it's got quite late in the end. So Tuckman argued that that by women being portrayed as either housewives, sex objects, domestic servants, or domestic consumers, this amounted to a symbolic annihilation. So I've written this out a few times and I'm still torn between symbolic having two L's, but we're just going to go with it. So a symbolic annihilation of women. So the idea, so remember, being annihilated is like the idea of you being exterminated. And so Tuckman argued that by having them only in these sort of limited ways, it was sort of getting rid of all other representations of women. So that's me just doing my point, evidence, and some explanation there. So then I'm going to link, and my link into the wording of the question, I want to use specific wording. So I'm going to be using the terminology, media representations of femininity based on stereotypes. So this shows that, and I'm not going to say, oh, this links to the question, because I'm going to use the word. This shows that media representations, don't know why I didn't cross, of femininity And recognise that I'm saying about how it's media representations of femininity. I'm not saying media representations of women at this point in my link, because I'm linking to the explicit wording of the question. Are based... Sorry, I just need to move so I can fit on the desk. Are based on stereotypes as even though attitudes of roles of attitudes of the roles that women should perform in the wider society have progressed. Oh gosh, that does not look like society, but you've heard me say it, so hopefully you got it. Progressed. That's why you want to make sure you write it alongside me, so that you can make sure that it's actually legible. That'll probably help the situation. Media representations. Still see women in passive roles. Passive limited roles. Not active members of society. This can often be seen in TV programs and advertising. Such as adverts for cleaning products. I've used an example there to aid my development, and in the media topic, that is a really easy way to sort of develop your points further. So I would strongly recommend, and I often do, sort of encourage you guys to start thinking of ways that you could give examples to your answers, because that helps you explain it further. So often I'll say to people, look, 3 sentences. You need at least 3 sentences for your point to be classed as developed. So that's not a target, that's a minimum. So it can be more than that, but I can guarantee you if you throw out a 2-sentence paragraph, it's not going to be classed as being developed. So that's 1 paragraph. Tuckman, tick that off. Next up, I'm going to go for Ferguson. So if you need to pause and get what I've written down so you can see that sort of extent of the paragraph, then by all means do so. But I'm going to move on to Ferguson. Remember, point, evidence, explain. Don't forget you've got the pause function on your phone, so do make use of it when needed. The media often represents women as being focused on men or to benefit men. So that's my point. I've gone straight in with it. Then I need my sociologist, my evidence. Ferguson argued that media representations centered around him, home, and this is the phrasing straight from Ferguson, looking good for him. Meaning that, so I'm showing that I know what that means, meaning that women are still seen as the person to care for the home and the man. Doesn't stop there though, does it? Plus, also having, that doesn't look like a H, but we'll go for it, the need to look a certain way. A way deemed or judged, whatever, that's a D, deemed attractive by men. Sorry about that, attractive. That doesn't look particularly, my pen slipped. Attracted by men. So, then I'm going to give my example. I'm going to give my example earlier for my development. It doesn't matter which way around I do it. These portrayals can be seen throughout the media, even in magazines aimed at women. And we looked at Cosmo. Okay, so now I want to link to the wording of the question, and I'm using the explicit wording. This, therefore, shows that media representations of femininity are based on stereotypes as this view of femininity shows the women's concerns to all revolve around man. And passes these messages to the audience. Okay, so hopefully you are writing as I go along, because I've just seen how diabolical my handwriting has got. So as you can see there, again, we have got my point is here. I've got my evidence. I've explained it. I've given an example, and I've linked it to the wording of the question, and I've used explicit wording of the question. The more you get used to doing this, it becomes sort of like a routine that you get into, and it will transform your writing in sociology. It will really help you develop those points. So that's my, where's my plan gone? Found it. That's my Ferguson completed. So all I need to do now is my criticism, my one criticism, and that is going to be from Glascock. Whenever you go into an AO3 paragraph, I recommend throwing in some robust evaluative language. Doesn't have to be anything really fancy, however will do. You're just showing you're looking at a different point of view. It could be on the other hand, in criticism, in critique, whatever, it doesn't matter. But show them you're criticising. So, however, it could be argued, this is my point, that media representations of women have changed in more recent years. I'm going to run out of space, aren't I? I'll have to squash it up a bit. In more recent years, and are no longer as limited can always budge it all up in a minute. Glasscock researched. So my sociologist researched media representations of women and found that there had been a shift nowadays. There are portrayals of strong, independent, women being shown in TV and film. Let me just quickly see if I can make some space before I do my this therefore shows that. Definitely, I can make some room here. Sorry, I realise that watching me scroll everything up isn't the most important use of your time, but I do think it's quite helpful to have it nice and clear on our pages. So I'm not actually changing any of the content here. All I'm doing is buying myself a little bit more space in my essay. Still going to leave that line so it's a clear distinction between them. And this should just make a nice little bit of extra space for me. There we go. Oh, technology, isn't it fab? Okay, however, it could be argued, where was I up to? And TV and film, I was up to the link, wasn't I? So, this can, oh no, I'm going to use my example, I think. This can be seen through characters such as Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games. I'm doing that annoying thing that people do when they try and squash it all in the bottom. Who demonstrates strength and does not rely on help from men. Now my link. This shows that media, remember, using the explicit wording, but it's going against it. This shows that media representations of femininity are not, or no longer, it doesn't matter, based on stereotypes, because I'm going against it. As stereotypically these characters would have been helpless. Oops. Helpless and needed a man to save them. I really do apologise about the squishing down at the bottom. Okay, so that's my final paragraph there. So, however, give me some nice evaluative language, show them that we're going for an AO3 point, give the point, give the sociologist, explain it where possible, use an example, and then relate it to the wording of the question and explain that link. So in terms of the way this is marked then, what we are looking for, we know, is 2 AO1 and 1 AO3. So when I mark this, I'm just going to annotate it so you can see how it would be marked how I would use the annotations. So as it's an AO1 point, it gets a KU in the margin. So I've got my initial point. Women are found to often be represented in a narrow range of roles. Tuckman is a sociologist. Tuckman argued that women being portrayed as either housewives, sex objects, domestic servants, or domestic consumers, that by women being portrayed as either housewives, sex objects, domestic servants, or domestic consumers, this amounted to a symbolic annihilation, that's a concept, of women. This shows that media representations of femininity are based on stereotypes, as even though attitudes of the roles that women should perform in the wider society have progressed, media representations still see women in passive limited roles, not active members of society. So this gets application because it's using the wording of the question, and then I've also given an example. This can be seen in TV programmes such as advertising such as adverts for cleaning products. This here is one example of a developed AO1 point. So we've got one. Next paragraph. Got the point. The media often represents women as being focused on men or to benefit men. So that is an AO1 point. Ferguson, sociologist, argued that media representation centred around him home and looking good for him, meaning that women are still seen as the person to care for the home and the man, plus also having the need to look a certain way, a way deemed attracted by men. These portrayals can be seen throughout the media, even in magazines aimed at women, e.g. Cosmopolitan magazine. And I've got an example there. I've just done it in a different order, but it's fine. This therefore shows that media representations of femininity are based on stereotypes, so applying, as the view of femininity shows that women's concerns to all revolve around a man, and passes these messages to the audience. Again, another example of a developed AO1 point. So these two paragraphs here, these are enough to get me for AO1 8 marks, because all I needed was 2 developed with evidence AO1 points. Remember, AO2 is out of 4, but the band will match the AO1. So if you have a look at the AO1 column on the page for the 16 mark scheme, AO1 is 8, so we slide across, and that would mean we get 4 out of 4 for AO2. So already we're in a great position. We've already got 12 out of 16 before we've even criticised, which is fab. So then we go to our next paragraph, and I'm going to zoom in on this because it's going to keep sort of dragging it off the bottom of my page. However, so evaluative language, and it would get an eval in the margin just so we know which angle we're going for. However, it could be argued that media representations of women have changed in more recent years and are no longer as limited as before. So that's my point. Glascock is my sociologist. Glascock researched media representations of women and found that there had been a shift. Nowadays, there are portrayals of strong, independent women being shown in TV and film. This can be seen through characters such as Katniss Everdeen in the Hunger Games, who demonstrated strength and does not rely on the help of men. This shows that media representations of femininity are not based on stereotypes, so good application there, as stereotypically these characters would have been helpless and needed a man to save them. And this is all you need for a developed paragraph. There's not much to them, and that's a developed AO3 point. If you have a look at the mark scheme, one developed AO3 point can get you 4 out of 4. So this answer is a 16 out of 16 mark answer. This is all you would need to write to get full marks for this question. Now, it's worthwhile spending some time having a go at some of these questions. You've got loads of them there. But one thing to bring to your attention, one thing I need to mention as well, is you want to make sure that you always have got one study in each paragraph, so your answer should have 3 sociologists, and we do. We have Tuckman, Ferguson and Glascock. Oh, I know I ran out of page because it's not actually on portrait, but never mind. I will pull this off so you can access it. So let's go back to the PowerPoints. Sorry, I know it was on the previous video, but it didn't actually work on mine. So this is a question I'd like you guys to have a go at. I'm not gonna, you've got a bit of time now, but I understand you might not have very much time, but you could start trying to have a go at least writing one of those developed paragraphs to see what it entails. See if you can get that explanation, and in particular, make sure that your link is explained, not just thrown in. So I want you to have a go at this question. You'll see that this question, oops, I want to use my pen, is different to the one that I've looked at because it's asking about age representations being based on stereotypes. So have a think of the studies you could be using and have a go at writing this question. You are going to be having your lesson with Paula after the break, so this is something that you can do at home by all means, but I've given you some sort of guidance of timings underneath which you might want to make use of. Now, your homework was due in today, so please do make sure that you upload that for me on the Google Classroom. It was that says hierarchy, it's meant to be hierarchy. That hierarchy homework, please do upload that for me because I am going to be checking those over. But something I am going to mention, and Paula's also going to mention it, is in our lesson on Tuesday, we'll be doing a mini mock, so like a knowledge check on all of the media representations, what we've covered in media so far, basically. So you'll have the opportunity to spend some time, and your homework as well is going to be revising for this assessment. It's not going to be exam style questions, so not like the responses that we've looked at today. It's going to be sort of just explain what this sociologist said or who wrote about this. And so you've got to try, it's all about making sure that you are revising the content. I'm not after you writing essay answers. So what I'd like you to do now is, with this time, have a go at planning the answer to this question, and then also have a go. You could write it in full if you've got time, but I want you to at least have had a go at one paragraph, writing a developed paragraph, and then you can send a photo to me to have me look over it. And then upload your homework and also its revision. So I am available on email throughout this hour, so between 9 and 10, so do email me if you have any questions. But do make sure you're back nice and promptly for Paula's lesson as well. Okay, thank you.